So yeah, it's funny listening to David. Everything he's saying, it feels like he's reading my email because I've been living and breathing everything he just talked about as far as the things that are challenging companies. So very resonates very well. So thank you, David, for that. In fact, I was taking notes as you were talking about things. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe we need to consider that. At any rate, so yeah, just a little bit about our journey. So very much in line with what David was talking about, kind of starting in the May, kind of April, May timeframe after kind of COVID started kicking in, and we started realizing, oh man, we got a lot of issues here because Cisco shut down all their offices, which is great. Cisco is a very employee-centric company, and it first and foremost cares about what, how they can support their company. So people interpreted this as, well, I guess I can go wherever I need to go because my company has shut down its office. And if I need to go overseas to visit family because they might be in a COVID situation, I'm going to do that. Or if I want to go, live on the beach, like behind me, I'm going to go do that. And so a lot of folks did that without really knowing the risk that took place. So from a remote worker standpoint or a flexible work standpoint, Cisco actually has probably 3 or 4 different policies. One is a flexible work option remote worker policy, which basically says, well, let me get to that in a second. There's a flexible work practices telecommuter policy. There's a global employee work location policy, all of which say a number of different things as far as checking with your manager and making sure that you can remote work or whether you qualify and whether the work itself can be done from different locations as one. But they all also say you must live and work in the same place as your payroll. So which is the core of all of them. And at some point, they also all say, if you're doing anything different, call the mobility team. So which was kind of news to us because we wrote none of these policies. These are all kind of internal HR policies that have been written over time that all sort of refer back to the mobility team to have some sort of governance, I guess, over this, but yet, we didn't know we had governance over this. And our adventure has been, since then, really being the ones that have had a really important seat at the table strategically, identifying where people are at, identifying what the risks are, identifying how to get people who are stuck back, and understanding, even from an employee relations standpoint, what their personal situation is, and if they can't get back, what do we do, and how do we go about managing that? So I can't say that we've had extremely strict adherence to the policies that exist out there, and in fact, going through this has kind of identified some of those gaps that we have from a governance standpoint. What has been the good thing about this, if there's a silver lining, is that we've been kind of thrust to the forefront. And again, I guess it depends on your perspective. Some people like being thrust to the forefront and having a seat at that table and being able to consult and advise at a high level. Some people maybe would just be like, I'd rather not have this problem. But I think for us, it's been great because we've recently reorged from an operations group into our HR or people and communities group. And I think as soon as we kind of went, as we were going into this group, as a lot of operations teams, have that sort of mantra of being very transactional. Even though we know in mobility we have very unique jobs and a very unique service that we provide that a lot of other folks don't know about, it has put us into the kind of spotlight to be able to consult at a very high level to show how unique our roles are. So it's been good from that standpoint. A couple statistics I can tell you. We've had hundreds of people that have been displaced as a result of COVID that we know about, and most of them have self-identified. We've worked to resolve almost all of them at this point to get them either back into the main country payroll location or come up with alternatives to either try to temporarily go. Some of them have gone on some kind of temporary leave of absence in some cases, but that's very few. The biggest chunk have come back and gotten back to their main location. Some we have put on assignments so that we're compliant and others we have put on a international transfer into the country that they are currently in now, and to get them on local payroll now so they're compliant, with the intention in a future state to get them back into the original country of employment when either their personal situation it allows it, or border restrictions or visa restrictions allow for it. Because that's the other kind of complexity that I think a lot of folks are dealing with, is kind of the immigration side of things, where, especially with the presidential proclamation, people kind of went off and try to do their thing if visas expired to get their visa stamp. And then all of a sudden, things got shut down either from a travel or immigration standpoint. They can't get back. So those are a lot of the same challenges as I talk to peers in this area have been dealing with, and that's some of the ways that we've been able to address it. The main thing that we're focusing on going forward, I think, is one, filling those gaps, because people are continuing to ask, can I work from anywhere? And a lot of those things that David mentioned, we're going to be considering and kind of retooling our policies. And from a compensation standpoint, compensation is very involved. We're very involved with compensation, as far as we're really concerned from a pay fairness standpoint. Yes. So it's not just about saving money or making sure people are, because what we have is a lot. You have someone who might be on a San Francisco salary who went back to India, and they're stuck in India making a San Francisco salary, which is like, they're billionaires over there now,
living
compared
like
to the person they're sitting right next to.
Right?
Yeah. So from a pay equity standpoint, it's very, very impactful. We want to make sure that we kind of rectify that and work in ways to rectify that without completely blowing up that person's personal financial situation. Because that person, although they're making a lot of money in India for a temporary period of time, they still have a mortgage that they're still paying in San Francisco, perhaps. So they still have expenses that they're paying for. So it's a very unique kind of situation. But we're looking to get our arms around that, and compensation is very involved in developing policies of their own for future state.
Actually, with what you just were talking about, answered the question that came in that said, Neil, can you advise if you've done any compensation adjustments by allowing people to work elsewhere? So that answered that.
We have, and we've been doing it on an individual basis to understand the full situation. We haven't gotten to sort of a blanket, this is how we're going to treat everybody. So again, very employee-centric company, very concerned about the individual, and that's how we've been addressing it. I do see us having a more blanket policy in the future for future requests, because, hopefully we don't get a lot of the same situations where people got caught off guard or got stuck. Maybe the future is a requested policy and a requested policy-driven request to work from somewhere else that is approved by the manager, mobility, and compensation together, once we kind of assess the whole situation, and then we're not getting into these kind of stuck situations.
Sure. So before we move over to Chris Chalk and a little bit of insight to Coca-Cola's program, Neil, I wondered, you mentioned like transitioning people to an assignment, or you went ahead and did you do permanent transfers? How complicated was that, knowing the immigration process as it is, or converting them from one status to the other?
Yeah, so that's one of the first things we look at when we have people in these situations, because most of them were returning to a country where they had, that was their primary nationality. And so if that, as a citizen of that country, that was the first thing we look at. Do they have the right to work in that country? If the answer was no, then we immediately had to have them stop working. We immediately would put them on a leave of absence or some other alternative solution that would not kind of conflict with the immigration standpoint. Most had, residency in that location, so they were able to work, which means we were able to go ahead and transfer them to that work location from a payroll standpoint.
Perfect. Thank you very much.